All right, today's lesson is solving equations involving exponents. You can apply the properties of equations to solve equations involving exponents if the bases of the two powers are greater than 1 and are the same, then their powers are equal. So we're saying, let's say we have two powers. Let's say base b. This is b to the x, that's b to the y. We're saying if this base is greater than 0, but it can't be equal to 1, then we know that x equals y. We're going to use this property. For example, solve 2 to the x equals 32. What you want to do is break 32 down as a power of 2. So we have 2 to the x. And then we know that 2 to the power of 5 is 32 because 2 times 2 times 2. If you multiply that, you wind up with 32. So according to that property, we can conclude that x has to equal 5. All right, how do you solve 3 to the x plus 1 equals 27? Well, you have a power base of 3, power of x plus 1. And 27 I can write as 3 to the third power. And according to the property, I can set these two exponents equal to each other. So I'm going to say x plus 1 equals 3. And if I subtract 1 to both sides, I know x has to equal 2. All right, solve 5x plus 10 equals 125 raised to the 2x. Well, you want to look for a common base. You're looking at 5 and you're looking at 125. I can write 125 as 5 to the third power. But remember, this is raised to the 2x. And this is 5x plus 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply these powers. I can multiply 3 times 2x. So I have 5 to the 6x and 5x plus 10. And since the bases are the same, I can set the powers equal to each other. So I have x plus 10 equals 6x. If I subtract x to both sides, I get 10 equals 5x. If I divide both sides by 5, I know that x has to equal 5. X has to equal 2. That's 2 times 5 is 10. All right, what about when we have fractions? You have 5 halves times 2 to the x equals 80. Well, the first thing you want to do is get rid of the fraction. And you can do that by multiplying its reciprocal to both sides. So what makes 5 halves? What can I multiply to 5 halves that makes it 1? I can multiply 2/5. But you have to do this to both sides of the equation. This is 2 to the x. And I'm going to multiply this by 2/5. So the reason I do this is going to cancel out, and I get 1 times 2x, so I have 2x by itself, 2 to the x power by itself. And 5 divides into 80 16 times, so I'm left with 16 times 2. So I have 2 to the x equals 32. And like I did in the first problem, I can break that down as 2 to the x equals 2 to the 5th. So we know that x has to equal 5. All right, here's another one involving a fraction. I have 1/5 times 5 to the x power equals 5. And what I can do there is I'm going to multiply both sides by 5. So I get 1 here. 1 times 5 to the x is 5 to the x. 5 times 5 is 25. Well, I know I can express 25 as 5 to the second power. So since the bases are the same, I can conclude that x equals 2. All right, solve 7 times 1/2 raised to the x power equals 7/8. Sometimes your base could be a fraction, but you're going to do the same thing. I'm going to multiply both sides here by the reciprocal of 7, which is 1/7 times 7, and then I have 1/2 to the x power. 7/8 times 1/7. All right, that's going to be 1. 1 times 1/2 to the x power is 1/2 to the x power. And 7 divides into itself once, so you're left with 1/8. So I can write this as 1/2 to the x power, and I can write this as 1/2 to the third, because if I multiply 1 to itself 3 times, I get 1, but if I multiply 2 to itself 3 times, I get 8. And notice the bases are the same. I have 1/2, I have a base of 1/2 here. So x has to equal 3. This concludes our lesson for today.